We left in the late afternoon, which meant I'd be arriving late night. My fears of how that trip would end started to intensify. Imprisonment, torture, or something even worse. The road was busy, horrible, with several kilometers of dirt and gravel, and well, I've told you before about Afghani drivers, right? Craziest overtaking behavior, speeding in maybe a 20-year-old Toyota Corolla. At some point, I started to think I was better off. Maybe a horrible car crash would be a better ending than in an Afghani cell. I was afraid, nervous, cold, hungry, which made the trip last much longer in my mind. At around 10 p.m., we stopped for dinner, and what was probably 12 or 1 a.m., we finally arrived outside Kabul, where another car was ready to pick us up. Again, I was made pay for my meal from my own pocket and pay for the trip from my own pocket. I found myself lucky I didn't speak the language, because I was wondering if in this country a person about to be executed would need to pay for the bullet. The final hour was the worst one. I was finally going to find out where I was going to spend my next days, or if there would be any next days at all. We come to what appeared to be some military facilities. During our dinner stop, when I was alone in the toilet, I gave in to my feelings and wept alone in silence. When we arrived at this military facility, I knew the options would be imprisonment or execution at that point. Then, when I got off the car, I was blindfolded. That was when I couldn't hold it anymore. I started crying strongly and loud while I was being led to I don't know where. I was prepared to hear a gun cocking behind me and started shouting. But after 2-3 minutes walking blindfolded, finally I reached what would be my new home. I had reached an Afghani prison cell and would be in solitary confinement here. After I was allowed to see again, the soldier asked me something, then he shows me a phone and asked me why I was crying. I was obviously crying because of you guys took my freedom away. I was crying because I came in peace and this is what you did to me. I was crying because I was afraid to die. But they wouldn't give a crap about any of that. Then I said the only thing maybe they would understand. I was crying because my family didn't know if I was dead or alive. There were two thin mattresses on the floor. I was curious if I was going to share that cell. I asked, didn't understand the answer, so yes, let's wait and see. The cell was composed of an elevated, floor tiled entrance, and I understand that was where one should keep their shoes. 9 small lockers screwed to the wall, they were all empty. To the left, the actual room, all covered with carpets. That would probably be a colony of dust mites. And since I'm very allergic, happy days! There were 2 blankets, and the soldier was so kind to give me a third one. I forgot to say that on the day after I crossed the border, I had bought myself a typical Afghani man's outfit. Many YouTubers did it on the other videos I had been watching, and that made a huge difference, as you draw less attention while walking outside and wouldn't feel like a tourist attraction yourself. During the trip to Kabul, I had been allowed to keep my jeans on, a polo shirt, and the Afghani clothing. Now, in jail, they will be taking away my jeans, my 2 jackets. I would only be allowed to keep the polo shirt and the Afghani clothing. There was very strong light on in the cell. There was another one in the bathroom. I asked if the cell one could be switched off. The soldier ignored me. I came to understand that while I was there, I would need to get used to sleeping totally covered under the blankets. It was the only way I could block the light. It was a long, sleepless night, and I started to miss the TV in my hotel. The only indications of time were the call to prayer coming from the mosque outside in the very early morning while it was still dark, and my meal times. Asians don't eat breakfast or dinner. Asians eat lunch 3 times a day. It's always a warm meal, usually with rice and some kind of meat. In Afghanistan, they also eat soup a lot. My first breakfast was surprisingly generous. A large Afghani bread, chickpea soup, and guess what? Wafer biscuits. I had a suspicion that it was too good to be true, and on one of the other days I wouldn't quite enjoy the food, so I hid the biscuits under the mattress. I ate the rest. There was a jug of water inside that I never touched because I didn't know since when the water was there and if it was drinkable. I ignored the jug of water the first 3 days. They would bring Afghani green tea with every meal and on occasion, even between the meals. That was basically my only liquid intake, and I started to wonder whether that would be enough. 3 mugs of tea a day. That morning, the first English speaking person came. Some of the people who spoke to me were very keen on protecting their faces, even when they were men. So I could only see this guy's eyes and a bit of his fair hair. Let me call him the ninja. Again, we went through my whole story, my full name, nationality, my intentions in Afghanistan, why I was carrying so much stuff with me, etc., etc., etc. At the end, he thanked me for my answers, but he didn't believe anything, and he and his colleagues firmly believed I was a spy. And he said next day he would visit me and he would want to know exactly who I was working for, the name of that secret organization, and my intentions there. I kept repeating my story. There were no other significant events that day. My meals were okay, although very simple. Sometimes meat, sometimes rice, sometimes a soup. Bread always, and tea always. I always found green tea absolutely tasteless. Green tea from the Afghani prison ranged from tasteless to having a taste of washing up liquids, so at least I knew that they washed their electric kettles in their kitchen. On the day 5 of my abduction and day 3 of my imprisonment, I was called outside, blindfolded again, but left with a limited field of vision so that I could look at my feet and see where I was walking. I was taken to a closed room. There was a long table, a chair, a strong light focusing on the chair, and hanging from the table, 2 handcuffs. I started to cry. I was told to sit. The prison employee that brought me there ignored me and went to a smaller room. A minute later, the employee came and gestured for me to enter that other room. I had already forgotten at this point how many times I was interrogated. They knew the story of my life upside down and backwards. Another employee this time, slightly worse English than the ninja, Ali, let's call him that, went through my whole life again. But this time, he had a whole stack of A4 printed out sheets of paper. There were boxes there that needed to be completed. All questions were handwritten, and all answers I gave were copied from the translator's software on his phone. After what was something like 40 to 90 minutes of interrogation, this guy shows me some word in a language he said was Pashto, saying that that was my name there. I wasn't asked to sign anything, but instead he showed me a stamp ink pad, something I hadn't seen for over 20 years, and told me to stick my thumb there and print my fingerprint there and then on the handwritten paper. I was a little bit hesitant at first, but then I saw the guy translating, so maybe there was a 50-50 chance he wasn't writing anything incriminating. At the end of the interrogation, he came with the same story that we don't believe you and blah blah blah. So tomorrow I'll be interviewed by someone else, not as nice as me, and that person will torture me from bottom to top. That was the third time I started crying, this time in front of this guy. On seeing me crying, he tried to soften his speech, but the damage was already done. I went back to my cell horrified. Later that night, I was summoned. I was scared like crazy because they took me again to the room with the handcuffs. It was late evening, and I was pretty sure they would torture people in the evening or in the middle of the night. I sat in front of the handcuffs, and then this employee calls me to the small room again. where Ali was. Strangely, he had a very soft tone, and he had another stack of A4 paper. I wondered if I should be asking questions, but I said, "I'm surprised you're still working. It's late." To which he replied, "In our job, we work 22 hours a day and sleep too." And also, for my surprise, one of the first things he asked me was, "Alex, do you want to convert to Islam?" That took me by surprise. After hearing that, I decided that keeping silence was my first reaction. Then I said that I was brought up as a Christian, and I know to be a Muslim you need to study a lot and learn Arabic, and that it was too difficult for me. Then he started the next round of interrogation using a translation app, and I took the chance to peek at the time on his phone. I think we started at 9 p.m. and finished at over 10 p.m. When I was returned to my cell, I was thinking for a very long time. The conversation had been friendlier now, and maybe he asked me this thing about converting to Islam because deep inside, he knew I was in real trouble, and this whole story wouldn't end up well for me. That night, I started to consider my options. Maybe next time we met, I should start asking him if someone could start teaching me about their religion and so on. Day 4 started with more interrogation. This time, they wanted my whole academic life and my work life. When they were done, they brought my laptop. That is where I started to realize the level of incompetence of those people. My laptop has Windows and Linux, and apparently they never touch the Windows part, as it doesn't open by default. Not that I had anything to hide on the Windows part. I've also looked at my cloud. They didn't delete any of the pictures or clips that I had taken while in Kunduz. I almost don't use Facebook, but they never realized the profile I had shown them was a fake. And of course, I'm changing my numbers, passwords, and etc. just in case. Meanwhile, in the cell, I noticed that they were putting a very different kind of torture in place. Painless torture. The light that never went off, the very noisy ventilation fan in the bathroom that stayed on all the time and that eventually I found out how to switch off. My only chance against the cold were the 3 blankets that I had. Looking now at what temperature Kabul had on those days, I realized it was between -4 and +3 Celsius outside. And I don't believe it was much warmer in my cell, as it was connected with the outside for better ventilation. On the third day, I threw away the water from the water jug and expected them to refill it with fresh water, but the jug was ignored for a whole day. After which I asked the kid to take the jug and refill with water inside. He just pointed to the tap. I gestured to him asking if he drank that water, and he confirmed he did. I still refused to drink the water until the fourth day. After years of war, military occupation by foreign forces, and poverty, Afghani people follow a strict no wasting policy. They eat meat, lots of it, and they eat everything. So remember when I said that there would be a day when I won't be able to eat the food? That was day 3 and 4. Two of the meals consisted of a bowl with some greasy fluid and something that looked like a little bit of meat floating on it. I drank the greasy fluid, ate my bread, and went to check carefully whether anything could be used of that. In the middle of veins, arteries, bone, grease, I found a tiny little chunk of meat, which I very happily ate. I didn't want to cause offense to any of them, so I disposed of the non-eatable bits in the toilet. I knew my situation in that place. I was just nothing. I was worth less than a local prisoner because they thought I had no one looking for me except for my family. Most countries in the world have no diplomatic ties with the Taliban, and Brazil was one of them. My family would probably be trying all they could, but at the end of the day, the Brazilian government would just say that I was on my own. They advised against travel to Afghanistan, and if I decided to do it anyway, they wouldn't help me. So at the end of the day, if I died, the Afghan government could say I was not in the country. But some friends had pictures from me entering the country and of my passport and visa, so the Afghani could still deny any knowledge of my whereabouts. or invent some story that I had a horrible car crash and didn't survive, and the car was on fire, so there was no body to return. So, yes, it was a fact that they were painlessly and slowly torturing me. I was cold, malnourished, and dehydrated. Also, every morning I woke up coughing, and I was constantly repeated to the people coming to bring me food, I am getting sick. It's too cold here. But I knew what the cough was. Since I had been sleeping 4 days under a pile of dirty blankets, my allergy was showing itself every day. The bathroom in the cell contained a shower, a sink, and a squat toilet. I love traveling in Muslim countries, Middle Eastern and Central Asian countries. I had seen squat toilets in my life. Actually, the first squat toilet I saw was at a train station in Italy. I don't remember which. If you do, please leave in the comments down there. Which train station in Italy has squat toilets? If you never saw a squat toilet in your life, here's one. Right now, you should be wondering, how on earth people do number two in that thing? Right. Unless you've been trained your whole life, it's not that easy. So in that cell, I had to go to the bathroom completely naked because the Afghani shirt was long until my knees, and I didn't want it to be touching the piss. Then I would stand and relieve myself because I don't have the balance or the physical condition to do it like the locals, obviously, and I didn't want to fall sitting on the crap. And why am I bringing that up? Because on day 4, I started to have diarrhea. At the point, that was when I realized what was going on with the food and the lack of water. I was starting to get dehydrated. I would need to get the jug, fill up with water, and drink it. On day 5, I summoned some courage and I did it. The water was obviously freezing cold, but it didn't taste weird. I drank 2 mugs of freezing water, very slowly, sip by sip. Another thing I was feeling the whole day was the shaking. It was the cold, but it wasn't only that. It was also the fear, the stress, the anxiety, the sadness that my family could be really worried about me. But while I was kept in captivity, I wouldn't know that. Every day, the people who brought me food were very young kids, probably in their 15s or 16s. And at some point, I even heard a baby in the premises. Shocking that they had a facility with a torture chamber and they had children in the area. My captors were quite secretive about the place, but I could see a part of it. So it was some military compound outside Kabul. They even had a volleyball court inside, as I saw some of the soldiers playing. On day 5, after being brought a late meager breakfast, I gestured to the kid asking if anyone would be coming to see me. He said, sounding very sure of what he was saying, that no one would be coming. And he even gestured that I would be there for 5 more days. Truth was, they didn't have a clue. Same way, on the day I arrived, a soldier said, tomorrow you'll have a flight back home. You just stay here tonight. It was probably part of their psychological torture. Sometime later that morning, another guy opens the door, and from a black rubbish bag, he takes my jeans, my 2 jackets, and throws on the floor, looks at me, and points at the clothes. I ask in English, am I going home? And he agrees. I am then blindfolded for the last time and brought to a minibus, where through the bottom of my vision range, I see my 2 backpacks. Still, I wasn't convinced. At the end of 20 or 30 minutes driving through busy Kabul streets, I have my blindfold taken off and could see that I was somewhere in front of a government office. Police cars parked everywhere, and I am taken inside. I was allowed to carry my own backpacks. I am then brought to a waiting room and waited for yet another half an hour. Again, brought to a place where I had no idea what I was doing there. A young man only asked if I spoke English. I said yes, and that was it. To be honest, I didn't have the courage to ask him what the place was or what I was waiting for. Finally, someone calls me to come inside with my bags. I remove my shoes and enter. Inside the room, covered with carpets, men from their 40s up some quite old, were all sitting on cushions on the floor. Not a single desk or computer to be seen. Tons and tons of paper everywhere. The most modern piece of equipment in that room was a printer, connected to no computer and the man's mobile phones. One of the men was handed over what appeared to be my dossier. Then again, we go through the whole ritual: name, family name, nationality, blah, blah, blah. To which they take down notes all by hand. Seriously, the Taliban were running a country like in the 19th century, in all possible ways. I was still not 100% sure I was being released. Then they gave me my two passports in my hands and gestured to me, asking if all my belongings were in those two bags, and pointed to my bags. I started telling about the $300. They asked for someone to be brought, not the kid that was outside, but another mature man. He knew some English. I tell the episode of when my belongings were seized to the man. They talk among them. The guy translated. He apologized for my money disappearing and for nothing else. The trip they ruined, the psychological torture, the abduction, the accusations of spying, nothing. But yes, they did apologize for the $300 that were taken from me and asked my number that they already had and that now I do not use anymore, and someone would get in touch with me via WhatsApp to return that money. I gave the number again, but I said to them that that money was written off, and I asked them what kind of I can go home was happening here. I was being deported, and to be honest, I would be absolutely happy if they were deporting me back to Brazil. With airline tickets being the expensive they are nowadays, I never thought one day I would be so happy for being deported. But no, they were just letting me go, just like that. I thought they would ask if I needed travel papers to make sure I didn't have any further inconvenience with their people in their country, but no. They took a statement from me of what was missing in my belongings and had a man walk me to the door. Again, no apologies, no papers, nothing. I was abducted in Afghanistan by the Taliban. 2 days of house arrest in a hotel. One forced 10-hour trip to Kabul. 5 days in solitary confinement with little food, no water, and cold. I had come to that country to give them free advertisement, to show the world it was okay to travel in their country, that their people were friendly, the landscapes are gorgeous. And this is the treatment I got. But it was happening. I was being released, and I was allowed to go anywhere I wanted with my head on my neck. The man who took me inside stopped the taxi driver. The driver said the price to go to the airport, and I entered the car. Long way, roughly about 20 minutes to the airport. My phone still had some battery left, and the travel SIM I was using in Afghanistan was still valid until the end of the day, as I had bought a 1 week bundle. But I resisted looking at my phone, looking at Google Maps to see where I was, looking at WhatsApp to see how desperate my family and friends were, without any news from me. I had to feel safe. I was afraid at the next checkpoint, some Taliban would ask me for papers, start asking questions, and then start it all over again. I had to reach the airport. Kabul airport has 3 or 4 checkpoints before you get to the actual terminal. The famous "Welcome to Afghanistan" that you see on every YouTuber video, that's in front of the terminal so you don't see it until you've cleared all the checkpoints. And of course, they will need you to show an airline ticket to get in. In the free world, I use websites like Kayak or Kiwi to check the cheapest flight and buy the ticket on the airline's website. 20 years working in the travel trade taught me the lesson: don't trust travel agents. Cut the middleman. But I couldn't be wasting 1 hour with crappy internet that time. I needed to be out of there and fast. A flight to a free country could be leaving within the next 1 hour. There's something like a shopping center after the second checkpoint and some travel agencies there. I go in and ask the man what flights are leaving within the next 6 hours. There was no flight to Turkey that day. From the very few destinations connected with Kabul, the only one where I didn't need a visa for was Dubai. There was a flight 4 hours later with the Afghan airline Kam Air. That meant that I was only legally outside Afghanistan when I landed in Dubai. The agent sold me that ticket for almost €300, which was twice as much as a normal ticket to Dubai would cost. But I took it. After the 4 hour wait, I finally boarded the plane. I felt that even in the relative safety of an international flight, I was still shaking. I watched some movie to try to rest my brain a little. When I first walked into Dubai International Airport, I felt as free and alive as I never felt in my life. What the hell happened? I think I'll never know. There's a United Nations convention called International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. And according to that, forced disappearance is a crime as defined in international law and is considered crime against humanity. 98 states have adopted that convention, but of course, Afghanistan is not one of those countries. Enforced disappearance is defined in Article 2 of the convention as the arrest, detention, abduction, or any other form of deprivation of liberty by agents of the state, or by persons or groups of persons acting with the authorization, support, or acquiescence of the state, followed by a refusal to acknowledge the deprivation of liberty, or by concealment of the fate or whereabouts of the disappeared person, which placed such a person outside the protection of the law. So there was no doubt I was a victim of enforced disappearance, a crime against humanity, but no one will really ever know what happened to me. The same way every authoritarian regime falls one day the people of Afghanistan will be freed from their theocratic and oppressive government, and there is a little chance that my name or my whole dossier will be found in the middle of hundreds and hundreds of files in some dusty room. But I don't think this will happen within my lifespan. If I was really a spy, these people would have miserably failed in their task. I doubt that a highly trained operative from an enemy government would be trying to pass as an innocent tourist. So what happened to me would be ridiculous if it wasn't revolting and totally wrong. I hope this video reaches those who plan to travel to Afghanistan. If you are planning to go without a guide or a fixer, don't. You saw what can happen. There is no guarantee you'll be guest of their government, like it happened to me, for 1 week, and then they will release you when they're done. If you think just because you have 3 grand or two or one, doesn't matter, to pay for a fixer that will guarantee you're safe in Afghanistan, look at this. Before setting off on my trip, I watched this video. Joe Fazer is not a travel vlogger. He's a bodybuilding influencer whose YouTube channel is about gyms and building muscle and all that stuff. The guy has a passport from an enemy country. And there was this comment on his video that read, Joe literally looks like a US Marine. This guy was stuck in Kabul, together with his fixer, and things got pretty bad just because he had a small microphone on him, so he decided to abort his trip on the day after arriving. Unfortunately, I wasn't as lucky as being able to run to the airport and catch the first flight out. The money these guys get from tourists are to bribe key characters within the Taliban, so that these bloggers are allowed to come and make these beautiful videos of how beautiful life is now the Taliban is looking after us. The YouTubers I mentioned in the beginning of this video obviously have something to gain, but little they know that they're being used as an instrument of propaganda. If 10 or even 5 people who are planning to travel to Afghanistan change their plans after watching this, I will have reached my goal with this video. Thank you for watching.